Glad you made it back, everybody. It's romper room at the Pentagon and the White House, as once again the Biden regime is claiming with little evidence that Team Trump was guilty of the same things Team Biden is actually guilty of. But Trump and many of his top national security officials, including John Bolton, Robert O'Brien, Ric Grennell, they say they never heard of a Chinese spy balloon entering U.S. airspace under Trump's watch. Now Democrats and their media cohorts are scrambling to adjust the narrative. First, they said that Team Biden discovered the breaches after Trump left office. Now they are changing their story again, saying China's balloons came near the U.S., but not into our airspace during the Trump era. They can't keep their story straight, kids, because they're caught. Joining me now is former Pennsylvania congressional candidate, former executive director of the Iranian Americans for Liberty, and Newsmax columnist Bryan Leib, and vice chair of America First Policy Institute's Center for American Security, former Trump National Security Council chief of staff and Newsmax contributor, Fred Fleitz. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. Fred, I want to begin with you. Your reaction to the romper room at the White House.
Well, the two men I think are most important from the Trump administration on this issue are Pompeo and General Kellogg. Since they were there all 4 years, they had access to intelligence. Pompeo was Secretary of State and CIA Director. Kellogg was in the Vice President's office for 4 years. He's a colleague of mine at AFPI. He read the presidential daily brief every day. He said there was never a reference to a balloon like this. He said this just didn't happen. And I think this is so obvious. That's why this story is changing. Now we're hearing that this happened after the Trump people left office and it was undetected. The balloons floated near U.S. territory. I think they just told a lie that was easily disprovable, and now they're struggling to protect it.
Yeah, what about that, Bryan? What do you make of the Pentagon being complicit in lying to the American people? Doesn't that show you how compromised our Pentagon may be?
Well, I think it does, but in a lot of ways, the damage is kind of already done. I mean, yes, the DOD and the Pentagon are walking back their statements, but you know, the left-wing media and the CNNs and MSNBCs of the world, they've already put out that news story now that Trump and the Trump White House was aware of 3 spy balloons that came through, and honestly, it doesn't pass a smell test from what Fred just said and from what we've heard people talking about now over the last 24 to 48 hours. I mean, everyone from Devin Nunes to Ric Grennell have forcefully said this did not happen. And let's not forget, there were more leaks coming out of the Trump White House, not because of Donald Trump, but because of the people in the White House. I mean, I think we would have heard about 3 spy balloons coming, across the continental United States that Trump ignored, if that was actually true.
Absolutely. Absolutely. CNN would have been there with cameras, to film everything. It is all propaganda. It's left-wing communist propaganda. Fred, military officials claim they were able to jam the balloon and block it from gathering intel during its flight. Now, I spoke to Colonel John Mills on my radio show. He said he's not buying it. Listen.
They don't care about 84% of the American population who believe there is a deep state. They don't care. They don't care. And so Hayes and Schuster, I'd like to know how many flight hours they have in one of, obviously they're an electronic warfare officer qualified. I don't know how many flight hours they have in a Prowler or one of our other electronic warfare aircraft. Obviously they're experts. They don't realize the complexity of conducting an EW operation inside the confines of the United States. I've run the packages up to the White House. You would not believe the legal complexity in somebody blocking signals like this. You think it's simple? Are you kidding me?
Fred, isn't it more likely that China has collected a whole mess of data on the United States with the intention to harm the United States?
Well, we're hearing a series of what appear to be lies here, that the satellite was being jammed. There was another lie that the administration was spying on the balloon, find out how it was operating. I don't think that's true either. But what I think really happened here, this was a probe. It was a probe of air defense, and it was a test of President Biden's leadership. I actually don't think it collected much of value. What it collected was on America's preparedness for a real effort to violate our airspace. And it's pretty clear that Joe Biden failed these tests.
Yes, Joe Biden his leadership inside of his regime. They all failed us. They've been failing us for the last 2 years. Brian, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, one of those individuals, was forced to cancel his upcoming meeting with China amid the spy balloon fallout. And I speculate that he was one of the chief architects of downplaying the spy balloon and maybe allowing it to transgress into our airspace so he can get a pat on the head from his friends over in communist China, because they ripped him a new one in Alaska here a few years ago. So he wanted to show how much of a team player he was with the communist regime. Any truth to that, do you think?
Well, I mean, there's probably a lot of truth to anything regarding Antony Blinken and cozying up to our adversaries, whether it's China and Russia and Iran, because we've seen, what Blinken's calling card is over the last 24 months. And really, he really should be absolutely ashamed of his actions as our Secretary of State. You did a segment earlier about if you were president, what would you do? Well, now's my turn for if I was Secretary of State, what would I do? I would have shot the thing down while I was midair on the plane going to China to have a face-to-face discussion with them. That would have sent an actual message of strength instead of waiting 3 to 4 days to shoot the thing down and then canceling a trip to go. It's just continued weakness from Biden to Blinken to everyone. And the American people, we're the ones that are suffering from this weakness.
Yeah, Blinken makes Neville Chamberlain look like Ronald Reagan, to be honest with you. Bryan Leib and Fred Fleitz, gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate the time.